Okay, welcome back, Ryan. I'm going to start the tape again.
Okay.
So you made it back. That means I didn't scare you away in the first session. That's good. Were you able to listen to the recording of the last session?
Yes, ma'am.
How was that?
It was different.
Different. It's different to listen to yourself on tape. I know
Right.
that can be a funny thing. Anything in particular that was bothersome or you have questions about?
No, I don't really have any questions.
Okay. Well, we're going to be listening to a lot more tape, so I bet you'll get used to it.
Okay.
How about the breathing exercises? Were you able to practice those?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. How are you finding them?
I guess they've been helpful.
Really?
Yeah.
Your face is not saying helpful.
Well, it's not a cure-all.
Yeah.
I understand that, and I guess
right.
it's just more of getting into the habit of doing it.
Okay. So you're having trouble finding time to practice, or is it just not helpful?
I mean, it's been helpful. I guess, like I said, it's just not habit to just kind of get myself to wherever I need to be and just go through those exercises, making the conscious decision to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is. You do have to set aside time, and this is a treatment that does require some time at home. So you got to
Right.
figure out strategically where you're going to put that.
Right.
And remember, with the breathing, it's just like any other kind of tactical exercise. The more you practice, the better at it you're going to get. So it might not feel all that relaxing or calming the first few times you try it, but if you keep practicing it, it should give you some relief. So
Right.
give it a shot for a few more weeks and see if it'll be more helpful for you. What about the reading material, the rationale for treatment? Were you able to read that?
Yes, ma'am, I did go through those.
Okay. Any question about that? I mean, we talked about it, but it was kind of a repeat of that. Any questions about that?
No, ma'am, I didn't have any questions.
Okay. All right, good. Okay. Well, today we're going to keep moving right along.
Okay.
I think it's helpful for you to kind of understand some of the common symptoms that people have with PTSD, so we're going to talk a little bit about that today.
Okay.
And then at the second half of the session, we're going to make a list of those items. We're going to work on that in vivo exposure list that we were talking about in the previous session. So we've got a lot to do today. We're going to work on talking about common reactions for a bit. We're going to work on in vivo exposure. And then at the end of this session, you're actually going to go home with your first assignment to work on in vivo exposure at home.
Okay.
Okay? So let's start with common reactions. Now, I'm going to start with sleep because that's one of the things that brought you in here.
Right.
I know you said when you first came in that sleep was really horrible for you, that it was interfering with school, that you were having a lot of trouble getting enough sleep, so you're feeling tired and sleepy in class, sometimes missing class because you'd wake up late. And that is actually a common complaint of many service members, whether they have PTSD or not. Right? I mean, do any of your friends from when you were deployed complain about the same thing, complain about sleep issues?
I've spoken to several different guys, and they've all mentioned pretty much the same thing, that their sleep was definitely different when they were on deployment.
Yeah.
And especially when coming back,
Yeah.
that they were having issues with it. So I guess to some extent I expected it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's true. I mean, deployment really messes with your sleep.
Right.
Because you're on all the time. There's never any, calm, quiet time to be sleeping. Your sleep is disturbed. You don't get enough sleep. And then when you get home, those kind of habits are hard to break.
Right.
But PTSD contributes even more to that picture and disturbed sleep in other ways. And so I wanted to ask you in particular how your sleep problems are manifesting. Like, are you having trouble falling asleep? Are you having trouble staying asleep? What does it look like for you?
Well, it's I guess it's been a healthy mix of a lot of things. It's been getting to sleep.
Okay.
It's staying asleep.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I've just been finding myself just laying in bed and unable to really turn thoughts off.
Okay.
And when I do get to sleep, I've occasionally been having nightmares that I don't know how to describe it. It just puts me in a funk for the rest of the day.
Okay. So a lot of things, like you said. So you're having trouble falling asleep because you have trouble sort of turning it off
Right.
and kind of calming down. And sometimes it's even stopping thinking about particular things, disturbing things that happened, that's keeping you awake. And then other times, once you get asleep, you occasionally will have nightmares that wake you up.
Right.
Now, are those nightmares about things that happened when you were deployed?
Usually are things around it. I mean, it's different every single time. Sometimes it's about things that happen on deployment. Sometimes it's just an environment, if that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And in fact, I was going to say this is exactly what I hear from other people too, that sometimes they have nightmares that sort of symbolize where they were. They're not necessarily the events that happened, but there's always this feeling of anxiety in the dream that's just kind of disturbing and distressing and feels like it felt over there. And then at other times they have dreams that pretty much resemble events that have happened when they were deployed. Now, when you have a nightmare and it wakes you up, is it easy to fall back to sleep, or does it keep you awake for a while?
No, it pretty much ruins the rest of the day for me.
Oh, okay. So if you have a nightmare, that's it for you then. You get no more sleep that
Pretty
night.
much, yes, ma'am.
How often are you having nightmares like that?
It happens pretty frequently. Not every night, but it's pretty frequent.
So no wonder you don't have enough sleep to carry a full course load and stay awake in class. I mean, that's a lot of sleep loss. Are you taking naps to compensate? Anything like that?
No, like I said, it's just difficult to get to sleep.
Okay.
Like I said, I just find myself just laying in bed, and I just find myself getting very irritated at trying to doze off, and I'll just think about if something happened in the day that makes me think about deployment.
It's even worse.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that goes along with a whole group of symptoms that happen in PTSD called hypervigilance or hyperarousal.
Okay.
And so you see that people have trouble falling asleep because they can't wind down. They have trouble staying asleep because they're on edge and they're having the nightmares. But they also have some other symptoms that go along with that, like they find themselves just being kind of a little bit more aroused or alert than everyone else around them almost all the time. So they talk about scanning the environment for danger, or making sure they see where everybody's at, or kind of always looking for what's going to happen next. Being easily startled, like when people slam doors or speak loudly and unexpectedly, things like that. Sometimes even with the phone rings. Are any of those symptoms familiar to you?
Yes, ma'am. Pretty much all of them.
All of them. Okay. Where are you finding that happening for you? Are you scanning like even in class, or is it just in unfamiliar environments?
I find that it's in class. It's like I mentioned the other time we met on the roads.
Okay.
That quite a bit, and definitely when I'm in class, when I'm around outside, I don't know what it is in particular that I'm looking for. I could just look at someone, and if they're fidgeting in a particular way, that I've been finding myself just getting very much on edge about it. If someone's walking down the street and looks at me, and they're carrying a big coat and it's hot outside, if it's they've got their hand in their back pocket and it's in a fist, and it's just why the heck would somebody do something like that?
I mean, it sounds like you're looking really closely at people too. I mean, I don't know that I don't think it's true that most people who walk down the street notice whether someone has a fist or has their hand in their pocket or not, or would think to wonder what that might mean.
Right.
And that goes along with hypervigilance, sort of that looking here and there to see what's going on in every place.
Okay.
And that's part of that whole group of symptoms, hypervigilance. Going along with that too, you mentioned already irritability, and you mentioned irritability with the fact that you can't fall asleep. But sometimes folks with PTSD feel irritable just generally in a lot of places, and not just because they aren't getting any sleep. They find that ordinary annoyances, things that might have been just minor annoyances prior to deployment, are now starting to feel really irritable and get them on edge and hard to stop thinking about it once something happens. Are you finding yourself more irritable?
Yes, ma'am, quite a bit. I guess it's been more, I don't know, I guess I've been noticing that quite a bit in my classes, just irritability with other people.
So the kinds of things they're talking about in class get you annoyed and get you irritated?
Yeah, it can be the things that we talk about. It's just, it's an attitude that they have. Just like I said, I already feel isolated considering the fact that I'm so much older than these kids who are fresh out of high school. And we were having a debate in class, in one of my classes, just about war in general. And just some of the things that come out of their mouth just really got me going. Not only is it just naive and completely ignorant, it's just a complete slap in the face, some of the things that they say. And to have some 20-year-old kid saying some of the stuff that they do, just in the back of my head, I'm just thinking, look, did you serve for your country? No, shut the hell up then. And it's just, the more and more that they spew out, it's just, I just got to the point where I just completely I just had to get up and leave the classroom.
Okay, so that's what you've done when you get that irritable.
Right.
Okay, what else do you do? Do you have any other reactions when you get really irritable with things?
In the classroom?
Anywhere.
I mean, I try not to explode. I mean, in class, I know it's one of those things where if it got to the point of me actually saying something, one, it can be, well, it's embarrassing enough to have to separate myself and leave the classroom like that. One, because I can already see it on my professor's face. They just think that I'm just being one. I wouldn't just say disrespectful, just that I'm just being a lousy student, that I'm just excusing myself because I don't want to be there. Okay. So I don't know if any of that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And you said a whole lot there that I want to kind of go back to, because you aren't just talking now about feeling irritable. You're talking about a lot of those unhelpful thoughts that we were talking about. Remember last session we were talking about some of the unhelpful thoughts that kind of go along with PTSD and that help maintain the symptoms? And those unhelpful thoughts are pretty common among folks with PTSD, and they follow along the same lines of what you're talking about now. And what I heard you say just now is you feel like people are thinking you're sort of, you're not a very serious student. They're sort of having negative thoughts about you. You're having some thoughts about yourself, like I'm feeling embarrassed because I had to leave, and what do people think about me?
It is embarrassing. I'm a grown man, and I can't handle sitting in a debate.
Yeah.
I've handled really complex missions, and I can't sit through a 45-minute class.
Yeah. And so, what does that mean about you? That's what I'm talking about with the unhelpful thoughts. So, sort of that unhelpful thought of what does it mean about you that you're the age that you are and you can't sit through a 45-minute class? I mean, what it means to me is you have PTSD.
Okay.
And things are happening in the class that are really irritating and it's kicking up your symptoms.
Right.
But I'm not sure I know what you're telling yourself about it. And so as we go through the treatment, as we work in the next few weeks, I want to follow up on some of those thoughts as well, because that's part of why we're going through all of these symptoms and why we're going to be doing the exposures is those thoughts are going to get kicked up and we're going to kind of chase them down and see what they mean. Because I'm wondering if some of those underlying thoughts are things like, I've been kind of damaged by what happened to me and I can't cope with things anymore. This is something a lot of folks with PTSD feel.
Okay.
Does that sound familiar?
I think so.
Okay. So we'll kind of just watch and see what we notice as we go through some of the rest of these things. Now, you mentioned something, when we're talking about sleep, we talked about the nightmares. Now, nightmares are a different kind of symptom. Nightmares are called re-experiencing symptoms, and people with PTSD complain about a lot of different kind of re-experiencing symptoms, nightmares being one of them. But there are other ways that you can re-experience the trauma too. People talk about having thoughts that kind of seem to pop out of nowhere. and once they start thinking about particular events that happen, they can't get them out of their head. And then other times they feel like they get triggered by things in their environment. So certain smells, certain sounds, even certain words or actions that other people can do might kick up a thought about the military, which is going to then give you a thought about being deployed, which is going to lead you to start thinking about the traumatic event. Is that something you've noticed, that you re-experience those events a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a lot of small things. It could just be music.
Mm-hmm. What kind of music is triggering you?
It's whenever I hear Johnny Cash or Zeppelin in the back, I immediately just think about what it was like downrange.
Is that something that somebody over there played?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
So it's just whenever that kicks up, it's I just feel immediately transported.
Okay. Now, is that a good memory of thinking about the music, or is it a bad memory? Does it lead you to the trauma?
Well, it feels like everything just kind of eventually leads me back to the incident with Corporal Thomas.
Okay. Which is kind of sad because you can't remember the music or the sort of the times when you were kind of hanging out and relaxing without having that then lead you on to other more distressing things.
Right.
Which is another thing that happens with PTSD. Everything kind of gets rolled up in that same big ball of wax that is the trauma. Right. Everything leads back to there. So we're going to be trying to pull some of that apart and help you kind of organize that a little better so that it doesn't have the ability to kind of send you right back to the worst thing.
Okay.
Okay. We talked about hypervigilance, and we talked about re-experiencing. Concentration might be another one that's important for you. I know that's important for students in general, and folks with PTSD complain a lot that they have difficulty concentrating. Is that something you found, like when you're studying or listening in class?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Okay. All the time, or just sometimes?
Quite a bit.
Quite a bit.
It feels like all the time in my classes. It's very, very difficult for me to just maintain that focus on whatever is happening in class, especially if I've had an awful night.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So sometimes the tiredness can be interfering with concentration. Right. I mean, when you experience a trauma like what you've gone through, it teaches you certain things about how you need to pay attention to this, or you need to think about that, and those unhelpful thoughts kind of fuel that. So they're under there kind of saying you have to pay attention to all these things. You have to look out for safety. You have to look out for this situation. You have to watch what people are doing, and that saps a lot of your energy and a lot of your focus in that direction. Okay. There's not a whole lot left over for other things. And so concentration really is sacrificed. So you can't focus on what you want to focus on because you have to focus on all of these other things. Make sense?
It does.
Okay. Another thing that folks with PTSD often will complain about is avoidance. And we talked about avoidance a little bit the last session. We're going to talk about it a lot more this afternoon.
Okay.
But when we talk about avoidance, we're talking about sort of avoiding those thoughts, so trying to put them out of your head, pushing them away. But we're also talking about avoiding situations, things, smells, sounds, music, things like that. You find yourself going out of your way to avoid stuff that might remind you of the trauma? I mean, you mentioned a couple of things in the first session. Are there other things you know of?
Going to the grocery store.
You avoid going to the grocery store?
I push through it. I usually go towards the end of the evening.
Okay. So you avoid going when it's crowded? Is it the crowdedness, or is it something else about the grocery store?
Part of it is the crowd.
Okay.
Part of it is also, I can't really put my finger on it. It's the aisles. The aisles itself. It's just, there have been times when it's made me think about the different alleys that we drive through, but it's just, partially it's the people there. Once again, that kind of triggers those thoughts that I think about with just the absolute disrespect for the fragility of life and the luxuries that you have.
So there's a lot of things about the grocery store that you're avoiding. So you're avoiding the kinds of people that you run into there because they get you thinking about those kinds of themes, like, you know, people are disrespectful, they don't understand what I've been through, they're sort of living their naive lives while I was doing this other work. The aisles remind you of narrow alleyways and narrow places where you had to.
And I just don't need all those options too. I don't need all that.
All the options in the grocery store. Okay, so there are a lot of things about the grocery store. Now, at the end of the day, though, you got to eat.
I do.
And it would be nice to be able to go to the grocery store without having to feel all that distress and without having to sort of dread going there. Right. So we're going to be working on that later. Okay. But I do want you to know that you're not alone in that. Folks with PTSD struggle a lot with all kinds of avoidance. Okay. And so a lot of folks that we work with will say, you know, none of my friends understand or none of my family members really understand why I don't want to go there. But I just, you know, there are just so many things about that bring the trauma back or that bother me or that just don't feel safe anymore. And it makes sense to you, but it doesn't make sense to other people. But it only makes sense to you because it's following that thread of the triggers, things that are reminding you of what happened when you were in Iraq. But for other people, it doesn't seem to make sense. And it's also preventing you from doing what you need to do. Right. Okay. People with PTSD also tell me, and something you said just now made me think of it, when you talked about sort of the people just not understanding what you've been through and kind of not understanding the fragility of life. People with PTSD often say they have trouble connecting with other people, that they don't feel like they have anything in common, or they don't feel like they can like even share on an emotional level anymore. Are you having any difficulty in any relationships or situations with other people like that?
I do. Well, like I told you in my classes, I'm much older than all of these guys who have just fresh out of high school, and it's I guess it's difficult to find any sort of connection when I've experienced something as intense as a brotherhood. That kind of camaraderie, just you're not going to feel that in a classroom. Okay. So I guess nothing has really come close.
Is it just are you having that sort of distance and not really feeling like you can connect just with the kids at school, or is it more general? Like, what about family members? What about friends you had before you were deployed?
I guess it's the same thing. With my family, I've been avoiding getting into avoiding seeing them. It was just...
Why would you avoid seeing your family?
It was all the questions.
They're asking a lot of questions.
When I came back from deployment, we had a lot of friends and family who came over.
It's like a welcome home kind of thing?
Welcome home, to spend time to catch up. And like I said, it was all of the questions really got to me, and I don't really know. I just got to the point where I was so tired of the questions of how is it over there. I don't know what it was about that particular question that really set me off. It was just I wasn't even sure how to answer that kind of question.
Yeah.
People thanking me for my service, as bizarre as that sounds, really, I just got to a point where I was tired of hearing that. And there's certain things I just don't want to share with my parents. There's certain things that I don't want them to be panicked about.
You don't want them to worry about your experiences? Or you don't want them to hear about the kinds of things you've been through?
Well, it's both. I don't want them... I'm not going to share with them all the details of what happened with that incident. When I'm trying to protect them. it's difficult to explain what it's like being downrange to someone who's just never been outside of the country. It's trying to explain skydiving to somebody. It's just completely over their head, and it's just not going to make a dent. And trying to someone really picking at me, trying to get all those answers, it just got to the point where it was difficult for me to share those things because it started calling up a lot of things that were very, very painful for me to share. I didn't really see any need to put myself through that. I don't see the need to put my parents through something like that either.
So you've just kind of kept them at arm's length since you've been back?
I have.
I mean, I know you've talked to them, but it sounds like not as much as they would like to have contact with you, and maybe not as much as prior to deployment.
Right.
Okay. Those are just a few of the common reactions that folks with PTSD have. I'm going to give you a handout that you can take home with you and read about some other things. There's a lot of detail in there about different common reactions that people experience. Some you will find very familiar, I'm sure. Some not so much, because of course everybody's different. Everybody has a different experience when they have PTSD. So you might not have some of the symptoms, but I want to give it to you because it's actually not only useful for you to read, but just like the handout that I gave you last week, the rationale for treatment, these two handouts are actually pretty reasonable descriptions of the treatment and also reasonable descriptions of PTSD that you can share with other people if you feel like doing that. Because sometimes I know family members, they can be worried about you, and they do ask those naive kind of intrusive questions, and they're well-meaning, but they don't feel good because they just don't know how to connect with you either. And so those handouts might be a helpful way to kind of say to them, this is what I'm working on now, and this is what I'm going through, and it might give you a way of reconnecting with them if you should decide you want to do that. So I'm going to give you that handout and let you take that home and read over it. And we're going to shift gears now and talk a little bit about more specific avoidances so we can start creating that in vivo hierarchy.
Okay.
Okay?